This will be a video on how to pick the EVVA MCS magnetic coated system, any generation. First I'll go through the tools that you'll need. The first is the pick. This is a standard pick that I have made markings on for the distances to each of the rotors. And on this side you can see there's a 1mm by 2mm neodymium magnet superglued to the end. So this will be the main tool that you use to manipulate the rotors. Next, you'll need a larger tension tool to set the sliders. Any kind of pick to set the ball bearing in the bottom. A tension wrench, which will be for the main picking process. You can custom cut one, or you can use wood pry bar. I like to have one that fits pretty tight in there and is pretty short so it doesn't interfere with the sliders. You can see the angle there is a little bit this is a generation 2 lock here, but this will work equally on a generation 1 MCS. The only real difference is the setting the sliders. We will need a high saturation magnetic shield alloy, and this I just got online, but it comes as a little strip cut off of a larger foil or metal sheet, and nothing too special, but there's plenty of them online. And the last tool that you will need will be a listening device. Now this is a guitar pickup that goes for acoustic guitars, but you could probably use a lot of different things. It has a little sticky side, so I just stick it onto the lock, and we have a small guitar amplifier here. Normally I plug headphones into this and then can just easily listen, but today we're going to have a little speaker set up so that you can hear what's going on inside. The theory on picking will be, we'll first set our sliders, which you can see in other videos. Let me go ahead and do that. That's pretty straightforward. We're just going to take this larger tension tool and a pick, set our ball bearing at the back, and rock this back and forth. Doing this around the camera is a little... Okay, there we go. I had to get the right angle there. So now we have our sliders set. Relatively, you can, if you lock it back up, you're just going to have to set your ball bearing again. So we'll switch to my other tension wrench here. And you should just have to set your ball bearing and then you're good to go. Sometimes you can do that with your magnetic pick, sometimes you can do it with, you may need to use this pick. It's just depends on whatever's easier. So the next step will be take our shield material, insert it. So if we put it on this side, it's going to block all the rotors on the right side, and then we can take our pick and pick the left side. Now we'll turn on the listening device, and what we're listening for is we're listening for no rotor movement. No rotor movement means that is the rotor that is binding. And in all lock picking, you're trying to find the binding element. So no rotor movement means binding rotor. If it has a very sharp click, it's probably in the gate. If it has a larger noise, it's probably free spinning. Either way, the noise is relatively doesn't really matter. What matters is that you learn to recognize the different sounds, especially the sound of your pick scraping on the inside. That you want to rule out. So let's go ahead and see what we can hear here. So you can hear, we can hear some taps. And let's go ahead and test the first rotor. Now let's go to the second rotor. Third rotor. Fourth rotor. So let me turn up the sound just a little bit. Okay. So let's go ahead and just go back to almost open. Now if you can hear, there's kind of a sharp click. The kind of this sound, that's just my pick scraping. So ignore that sound. There's some other sound there. That is rotor movement. Now we'll go to the second rotor. That's also rotor movement, but it sounds more like that one's in the gate. So I would say rotor 2 is not in the gate. Rotor 2 is in the gate. Rotor 1 is not in the gate. But either way, we don't need to pick either of those two right now. So let's go to rotor 3. We just hear a scraping, no sound. Now let's check rotor 4. You can hear a little bit of rotor movement. If you feel something with your pick, like you're hitting a corner, an edge, and you hear a sound, you can also ignore that. You're looking just for rotor movement, which you won't feel much with your pick. So that's rotor movement for sure. 2, that's a clicking rotor movement. Nothing on 3. So we're going to go ahead and pick rotor 3. Every time you remove or put your pick inside, you want to make sure you always have full tension on. That'll keep the rotors that you have picked in their correct position. So now we'll just, there you see on rotor 3 now we have clicky. Pretty solid that it's in the gate. Now we'll go to rotor 4. Rotor 2, we don't hear anything anymore. Rotor 1, lot of movement still. So rotor 1 is probably just free spinning. Rotor 2 feels like we need to pick it. So now rotor 2 is giving us clicky. Rotor 3 still is, so we picked rotors 2 and 3. Now again, you may have to go through the cycle and the process and pick. You're just looking for the rotor that's silent. It may free up again in the future, and it may bind again later on throughout the process. Doing it this way this is basically freehand. So 1 is good. 2 is good. 3 is good. 4 is good. So this side is good right now. Again, it may change in the future, but let's go ahead and switch now over to the other side, our blocking tool, and we'll test the rotors on that side. 1 is good. 2, there might be a little bit of movement, but I don't think so. I think we need to pick 2. Let's keep trying. 3 seems good. 4 seems a bit loose. It's a little bit hard to hear, but we're going to go ahead and go with rotor 2 as being the binding rotor now. And occasionally you can have multiple rotors that bind. That's fine. It's not a big deal if it's only one rotor. You're just trying to pick all the rotors that are binding. So the method to pick that rotor is really, I'm looking at my mark. That mark should be inserted about middle, right when it's at the edge. That means it's about at the middle of the rotor. And then I just jiggle it around and on and off tension. And that basically tries a bunch of combinations to get me to a correct gate. So really you could think of it like raking for a correct gate. At the moment, since it's freehand, you're not really going to be able to feel like you would single pin picking on a regular lock. You'd be able to do that if you had a more specialized tool, but in this case we're going with just easy to make tools. So now we have pin or rotor 2 picked again. 1 is good. One sounds a lot like it's free spinning, so we're not going to be able to pick it yet. 2. 3, we got some sound. No sound from 4, so we're going to go for 4 now. Again, you want to make sure you're not bouncing your pick around inside and hitting the walls, because you can see plenty of sound I can get just by hitting my pick against the side. So I want to keep my pick scraping, if you will. I want to keep that fairly constant so I can rule out that noise. Oh, there I locked it back up, but I was able to push it down with my pick and not have... See, if you can't push it down with your pick, you pull out, you may lose a lot of the positions of your rotors on one side. Just makes the picking process longer. Doesn't mean that you're not going to get into the lock. So you just keep repeating this process and the lock will open. It may not seem like it because there's no advancing in movement of the core. There's no way to check your progress other than the sound. This side seems pretty good now. So once you're getting clickies on all your rotors, you get clickies on all of them, you can move on. See, I got a lot of movement out of the first rotor, so it's definitely not binding at all. 2's good. Very crisp, you can hear. Sometimes you can't hear very easily, so having headphones in makes a big difference. 3 looks like our binding one. Maybe not. That's why I give it a good test. Definitely 4. Sometimes I also go for which one gives less sound. The low, like if one barely click, some sound you can hear eventually, maybe binding, but I move on to the one with the least sound on each given side. So now we got nothing on 2. 1's pretty good. 3 seems pretty good. Nothing on 4 either, so we're going to try to pick 4 here. So I think we're getting, yeah, now we're getting some pretty good sound out of 4. There we go. And you want to make sure you're not bumping into, moving too close to a different rotor, because then you may be getting sound from that rotor. So you can always go back and test as much as you want. And now we don't hear anything on 4. Oh, there it is. If it's moving good though, you should get, just like this, you should get sound every time you move the pick. Okay, I locked up, and since I was on only rotor 2 and rotor 1 was not yet set, pulling a pick out is fine. When you're at the back of the lock, it's... My video stopped, but since this is a demonstration and a how-to video, we don't really need to have it all a continuous take. But let's keep going with the process. I don't know if it'll be useful to see it actually open in here. I'm not going to gut the lock, but there is all 8 rotors in here and all the security bits, so you see what's going on and what the process is. It's obviously taking me a lot longer to do this, just talking and things like that. So from what I could hear, let's go through it one more time, just so you can hear, hopefully. Rotor 3 should be the binding one. Good movement out of 1. 2 has some, but not much. Nothing at all on 3. Some kind of snapping sound there on 4. So now we got 3, see? So 3 is fine. 4 is fine. 1 is fine, so now we need 2. So everything on this side looks fine. We're going to have to now switch to the other side. Keep going. 1 is fine. 2 is definitely fine. 3 seems fine. There's a little bit of sound on 4, but I bet 4 is binding. So now it looks like this side is fine again. You're looking, sometimes towards the end, you'll look for the rotor with the least sound. Again, it might not be totally no sound. You might still be knocking your pick around and you might think, oh, there's maybe some rotor movement there. There probably isn't. You just go for the least sound that you hear. Nice sharp clicks out of 2. It's probably in its gate. 3 is good too. Nothing on 4. That's a real good example. So listen to 1. Plenty of sound. 2, plenty of sound. 3, plenty of sound. And now 4. Oh, well, we got some sound on 4 now. But that could be us taking, if we take our pick out a little bit too far, we might be hitting into 3. If you're not sure, just switch over to the other side. Let's check again, see if anything else gives us a little lower sound than what we heard on number 4. Maybe 4 on this side seems a lot less to me. I'll go ahead and keep picking 4 here. Sometimes getting that gate is, there's one gate per rotor here, and it's not necessarily super easy doing it freehand. I think I got this whole side pretty good now. Maybe 4 still need. 3 were pretty good, so maybe 4 still needs. A little happier with that now. Let's check our other side and see how we're doing. So it seems like rotor 1 now. So all these now look pretty good. We got rotor 1 set. Let's check over on this side again. I think we're progressing now as I stop talking a little bit and start picking. Definitely rotor 3. You're just going for the least sound. You may get one rotor bind later on. That's fine. And there you can see we are open. Now, there's been some speculation that this is not actually picked, that somehow this state means you've, let me turn off the speaker here, that this state somehow means that the lock is not picked. Well, it is in fact picked, and although there are some magnets inside that will re-scramble the rotors when you go around 180, you could do one of two things. You could just revolve it and pick it a second time, which obviously is a long process, or the alternative is you can use a plug spinner, which is a pretty common thing. I've had mild success with just using a rubber band on here, stretching it and hitting it over, and about 50 to 60% of the time seems like it works. But I am getting a commercial plug spinner to test more reliability. So you can definitely get around with a plug spinner. If you did have a more all-in-one pick that held the rotors in their position, you wouldn't have that problem. So this is really just a proof of concept that it can be done. It's not this is the infiltration technique, or this is the super technique, or whatever. So have fun, pick your MCSs, pick this guy. I'm not saying you need to throw away your keys. I'm just saying there is a security flaw in this system.